All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, all you magnificent melon heads of the world. I hope you guys are well. Today is what's today? February 11th, 2025. And why is Fox News showing on my iPad? I have no idea. Sorry, guys, that was a little distracting. But good morning, everybody. The top story this morning is OpenAI, ChatGPT, Sam Altman, or should I say Sam Altman-Fried? I think that's my new nickname. SAF, we're going to call him. And Elon Musk. There is a tit for tat going on between Elon and Sam. The billionaires are not playing nice in the sandbox. What happened? Well, it seems Elon Musk has made an unsolicited offer to buy OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT. Elon offered $97.4 billion to buy OpenAI. Does Elon have $97.4 billion? I don't know, probably, maybe. Doesn't really matter. Is Elon going to buy OpenAI for $97.4 billion? No, almost certainly not. So here's kind of how it goes. OpenAI, back in October, the last time they raised money, they raised a couple of $1 billion, led by Microsoft, among others, at a $157 billion valuation. So Elon coming out now and offering a $97.4 billion valuation is something of an insult at Sam Altman. Now, Sam Altman and Elon were previously, about 2 weeks ago, not playing very nice in the sandbox when Sam Altman was one of the three stooges that was trotted up next to Mr. Orange as part of Project Stargate. The other three, who were the other three? It was Masa-san, and then it was the guy from Oracle. I can't remember. Larry Ellison, I think is his name. All three are basically like poster children for the AI bubble. They are just some of the guys who have come out with some of the more ridiculous statements about AI and just spouting off ridiculously large numbers. Well, Elon immediately went after this Project Stargate. Number one, he's got XAI and his Grok companies, right? He's a competitor for these guys. So there's always going to be a little bit of competitive stuff there. Maybe even a little bit of jealousy. Maybe Elon was like, hey, I'm the billionaire that's supposed to stand next to the president, not these other guys. Maybe a little bit of that. Whatever reason, Elon Musk kind of goes into a tirade on X about Project Stargate, which was largely accurate, that they don't have this $500 billion they claim they're going to be spending on all these AI investments. Sam Altman was posting videos of great big beautiful buildings that they're building as part of Project Stargate, and are like, no, Sam, that's actually an Oracle data center that's been under construction since 2021, not your new Project Stargate building that supposedly is almost done, even though you just announced the project yesterday. Elon would tweet out later that it's all fake and that they don't have the money. So this back and forth has been going on for a while. So for Elon to offer $97.4 billion when they just raised at $157 billion, it's kind of insulting. But then again, is it really that insulting? Is it so crazy to imagine that the valuation of OpenAI has dropped by as much as 30-40% since their last funding round? Because keep in mind, guys, we did have a little thing happen over the last couple of weeks. You may recall the DeepSeek story. So if your company is worth $157 billion, and then your competitor comes out with a product that is every bit as good as yours, but they're charging 1% of what you're charging, and they're making the IP open source so anybody can copy your product, do you think your company is going to still be at the same valuation? Is OpenAI really still worth $157 billion? No, it's not. And Sam Altman doesn't think OpenAI is still worth $157 billion. The problem is Sam Altman now thinks OpenAI is worth $300 billion. Yeah, you heard that right. A competitor comes out with a product every bit as good as yours, charging 1% of what you're charging, and then all of a sudden you double the valuation you're seeking for your company compared to what it was just a few months ago before all that happened. Well, it doesn't work that way either. So all these guys are just nuts. These numbers are stupid. And at the end of the day, the emperor makes no money. None of these companies make any freaking money. What is the point? The point is to make money, and none of them make money. They all lose money. And they're all going to lose more money because now the competition is essentially giving away the product for free. So how are you going to become profitable? This whole story is so stupid. This is just so unbelievably stupid. I cannot wait for this bubble to burst so we can stop talking about these stupid things and get back to talking about real people doing real business, actually making money, and earnings reports that you can actually believe. I cannot wait until that day returns. But it is not this day. I can tell you that. It is not this day. Altman responded by saying, no, instead, I'm going to buy X for $9.74 billion. Another petty insult lobbed at Elon because Elon just bought X for $44 billion a few years ago. Do we need to keep talking about this? Can we move on, pretty please? I hate this story. Billionaires having silly arguments. They're like parents fighting in front of their children. It's stupid. It's stupid. Act your age, boys. Be nice. Don't make me separate you two. Now, one story that's going on that's not getting a lot of coverage that I do think is very worthy of attention is pay attention to what's going on in India. I don't know exactly what's going on in India this morning. The article that I'm going to reference, it just mentions speculators. It doesn't really say what's behind the speculation. But yesterday, the Reserve Bank of India very abruptly intervened in the Forex markets to support the rupee. They dumped about $11 billion worth of their Forex reserves and used them to buy the Indian currency. Now, that's interesting because the Indian currency, or the Reserve Bank of India, was just late last week that they cut interest rates by 25 basis points in a largely expected move. So I don't think it's like a bad reaction to that rate cut that is causing this decline of the rupee. The rupee has declined since the beginning of 2018 from 63 rupee to the dollar all the way up to 88 rupee to the dollar. Well, after this intervention, it went from 88 to about 86.7. It did strengthen considerably on this move. I'll show you guys the chart. But what is really going on? It doesn't say this explicitly in the article, but I have a theory, and I think it involves Russia. And you can probably guess where I'm going with this. But in a totally unrelated story, wink, wink, hint, hint, Russia says that their oil is starting to back up at their Sakhalin Island terminal. It seems these restrictions, these sanctions against insurance companies that insure Russia's shadow fleet have been successful in preventing those Russian crude exports. So now the Russians have nowhere to put the oil that they're pumping. And so they're just putting it in ships sitting off of this island, and the ships have nowhere to go. Sooner or later, the Russians are going to have to stop pumping the crude there. And I think that may have something to do with what's going on with the rupee. Also, keep an eye on a couple other stories. We've got European energy markets. The price of TTF natural gas futures is starting to rise. That's a chart we haven't shown in about 2 years on this channel. We'll take a look at that one. You got a cold spell heading for Europe. Got another one heading for us. Unfortunately, the polar vortex is back. It's driving energy costs higher in Europe. It's something to keep an eye on, although not a catastrophe yet. We got Coca-Cola earnings just came out. They were pretty good. Coke beat on the top and bottom line. A lot of price hikes, a lot of inflation, but surprisingly, their unit volume increased also. So Coke appears to be gaining market share. You guys may recall last week we talked about Pepsi earnings, and Pepsi had seen price hikes, but they saw a decline in unit sales. Well, we're seeing the opposite of Coca-Cola. Their prices are going up, but their unit sales are going up along with it. So whatever Coca-Cola is doing, they are winning the cola wars against Pepsi, at least in this most recent quarter. We also got DuPont released their earnings. They had an earnings beat. A lot of demand for chemicals used in semiconductors and data center build-outs. No big surprise there. And another one to keep an eye on after the bell today, Supermicro. What to say about Supermicro? They're going to announce a business update after the bell today. Now, I use the phrase business update because it's not an earnings report, because their auditor won't sign off on their books. So their business update is a bunch of, in my opinion, criminals spouting off random numbers, and then people are going to buy or sell the stock based on what this criminal says. I wouldn't want to get involved in that. Number one, you cannot trust a single word that comes out of Charles Lang's mouth, assuming you could even understand it. You can't trust it. The guy has a documented history of fraud. The company has a documented history of fraud. That Hindenburg research report was damning. The Ernst & Young resignation letter was damning. They still haven't submitted any of their financials from last year. They're still facing delisting in just 14 days from now if they don't file those reports. So unless they release their audited financials, anything these guys say is just a bunch of BS by a known BSer. And so, I'm sure after Supermicro is going to report amazing numbers and everybody's going to be like, oh my God, buy the stock. And then we're going to remember, oh, that's right, this guy is most likely a fraud and you can't believe a single word he says. but I have no doubt that people will buy the stock based on what he says. It's up 57% in the last week. On what? On nothing. On nothing. They just announced their business update. They didn't release their financials. Their auditor hasn't signed off on their books. Maybe that happens today. But it's short of that happening. I don't know how anybody could possibly invest in this company other than just like buy a scratch off at 7-Eleven. It's same chances, same odds, I guess. Anyways, guys, we got a lot to talk about today. Why don't we shrink my big melon of a head and let's see what's going on in markets this morning. My voice is still a little bit coarse here. Thank you guys for your patience. The S&P 500 is off by 25 points or 0.4% lower ahead of the open. We've got the Dow is down 142 points, about 1/3 of 1% lower. And we've got the NASDAQ is off by 145 points, leading the way lower by about 2/3%. So stocks are down across the board, possibly more tariff worries this morning. There's not really any market moving news going on today. Stocks are just drifting lower here. We got a modestly lower dollar here, down by about 11 basis points, 108.22 for the DXY. Looking over at the bond market, we got yields are mostly higher this morning, just a little bit. The 30-year Treasury, 4.743. That's up 3 basis points. The 10-year's at 4.538, up 4 points and change. The 2-year's at 4.290. That's up 2 points. And the 1 month is at 4.341, up a fraction of a point this morning. So not a lot happening in bonds. Looking over at the commodities board, we've got gold is taking a breather this morning. Spot gold is back below $2,900 at $2,898 an ounce. That's off by about $10, $9.50 this morning, 1/3% lower after hitting an all-time high of $29.42 overnight. Gold was running again overnight, taking a little bit of a pullback here. Silver is along for the ride, off by about 43 cents here, $31.60 for spot silver. That's down by about 1.3%. We've got coppers lower by almost 3.5% this morning. Platinum is off by about 0.9%. Palladium is off by 1.3%. But oil is a little bit higher here, 73.47 for March WTI futures. That's up $1.15 or about 1.6%. Looking over at Bitcoin, we've got Bitcoin is lower again this morning, $96,891 as priced on Coinbase. It's off by about $500 versus yesterday. Of note, the 50-day moving average remains a ceiling here. We once again tried to break above that yesterday and failed. That resistance is looking pretty tough. If we break down from here, guys, we have a date with the 200-day moving average, which is down around 80,000. So Bitcoin needs to catch a bid here or it's going to be heading lower in a hurry. All right, let's talk about this India story. All right, I think we beat to death the whole Sam Elon thing. I don't see a need to spend any more time on that one. India's central bank intervenes to curb speculative rupee bets. Now, this story, this is interesting, this Bloomberg article, because it doesn't say what's driving the speculation. It just says speculators are causing the rupee to fall. Kind of like, that whole Richard Nixon speech. Remember when we temporarily closed the gold window in order to defend the dollar against the speculators, right? Apparently, those speculators from 1971 are still attacking the dollar. I mean, these guys have been at it relentlessly for like 55 years. They're still speculating, attacking the dollar because we still haven't reopened that temporary gold window closure. So apparently those same guys are now also targeting the rupee. The Reserve Bank of India intervened in the foreign exchange market this week to curb speculation in the rupee, according to a person familiar with the central bank's thinking. I wonder if he's related to that person familiar with the matter. Surprising traders who expected a more hands-off approach of the currency from the new governor. Remember, you've got a new central bank governor at the Reserve Bank of India here. He just cut rates last week. After hitting a series of record lows in recent weeks, the rupee gained nearly 1% against the dollar on Tuesday, its biggest rally in more than 2 years and the most among Asian peers. While the RBI didn't disclose the magnitude of its intervention, Anil Kumar Bansali, head of Treasury at Finrex Treasury Advisors, estimated it could have been as much as $11 billion over 2 days, which he said are levels not previously seen from the authority. The RBI decided to intervene on Monday and Tuesday after spotting an unusual buildup of speculative positions, which put added pressure on the local currency, the person said, asking not to be identified, discussing internal matters. the central bank won't hesitate to intervene significantly and suddenly to prevent an accumulation in speculative bets, the person said. Now, I have a theory of what's going on here. Let's look at the chart. All right. The rupee weakened substantially since this fall. All right. This is USD INR, the number of Indian rupees it takes to make one US dollar. All right. Obviously, as this chart moves higher, this is the rupee weakening, and it has been weakening slowly but steadily pretty much all year. Now, here's the intervention. We got as weak as up around 88 here, and then slam down goes the Reserve Bank of India. That was their defending of the currency, and now we're back down around 86.7. Now, the reason this is important, by the way, this has been going on for years. Let's, when in doubt, zoom out on the chart, right? Let's zoom way out here, going all the way back to 2017. You can see the rupee has been in steady decline for years. It was as low as 63 back in 2018. Now we're at 86 to the dollar. So the rupee has been weakening this whole time. But the reason why I mention this is whenever I hear about the rupee, there's one country in particular. It makes me think of Russia, because ever since the sanctions went on Russian oil, most of the Russian oil sales have been going to China and to India. Now, the thing is, China and India, Russia buys all kinds of manufactured goods and weapons from the Chinese. So you have a trade balance there. But with the Indians, the Russians don't really buy anything from India. So what's happened, as the Russians have been selling crude oil to India and the Indians have been buying it at a discount because of these sanctions, the Russians now have this massive pile of rupees and, well, nothing to do with them. Because if the Russians were to sell their rupees, trade them for something they could use, well, the value of that rupee would plummet. And, well, isn't that exactly what we're seeing? We're seeing the value of the rupee plummeting here. And I suspect that Bloomberg article, all it talks about is speculators, speculative positions. I wonder, would they say it in the article, could this be Russian oil traders finally dumping their rupees? Now, why would they be doing it now? And why would they do it in such an uncontrolled manner? Well, then I saw this article that my moderator Mish found. Shout out to Mish. Russia's Sakhalin Island oil is backing up after U.S. sanctions. Remember, guys, the sanctions have been around since 2022, but most recently, the U.S. put sanctions in place. This was one of the last things that Biden did before he left office. He put sanctions on insurance companies that were insuring the Russian shadow fleet tankers, the tankers that were, we'll use the word, illegally moving oil around the world. And, well, when those insurance sanctions went in place, that was effective. The shadow fleet was no longer willing to sail because they couldn't get insurance coverage, and there's just too much risk there. And so Russia has had a harder time moving their oil ever since that happened. We've seen stories about how the Indians and the Chinese have been forced to go into the spot market and buy Brent crude instead of buying that Russian shadow oil. So it's possible that this is what's driving the Russians to dump their rupee stockpiles, because their oil sales are being hurt here. They can't move their oil, so they're being forced to sell their rupees. And here you can see the oil is backing up at this island. Crude shipments from Russia's Sakhalin Island projects aren't being discharged after the tankers carrying them were sanctioned by the U.S. About 6.3 million barrels of Pacific crude is being held on vessels that have been stationary for at least a week. The disruption comes as Russia's wider oil exports have plunged, albeit following an unusually long storm that halted flows from another port in Asia. Only one of 8 so-called shipments that loaded since the shuttle tankers used to move the grade were blacklisted has discharged. 2 have been switched onto a super tanker anchored near the Russian port of Nakodka. Sorry, guys, I don't speak Russian. While the others are idling. Unless more cargoes are moved off shuttle tankers, the Sakhalin 1 energy project is about to run out of empty ships to load its crude. And this is kind of reminding me a little bit of 2020 when oil prices in the U.S. went negative because we had nowhere to put the oil. They were putting it in empty tankers, just floating storage. It looks like the Russians are going kind of the same place because nobody is willing to carry this crude because they can't get insurance if they do it. And I'm wondering if this story may have something to do with the sudden decline in the rupee and the sudden urge for the Indian central bank to support their currency. So keep an eye on that story, guys. We're seeing a lot of movement in the currency with the yen in Japan. Obviously, the Chinese yuan is having trouble. We're seeing the dollar has been generally strong this year. Watch these Forex markets. There's a lot going on over there. Let's also talk about the Red Sea because we've had a little bit of a setback in the Middle East. Red Sea ship traffic is yet to pick up as ceasefire risks swirl. Ship traffic through the Red Sea has remained slow in recent weeks, despite a prolonged period without attacks from Yemen's Houthis. While there haven't been any incidents since the rebel group announced a truce last month, the number of vessels sailing through the Gulf of Aden remains unchanged, according to a joint maritime information center, which collates information on the militants' attacks from multiple navies. U.S. President Donald Trump said Israel should call off the ceasefire agreement with Hamas if hostages aren't returned this weekend, risking another escalation of hostilities. So we've had this ceasefire, and early yesterday, the story broke that Hamas was saying the Israelis are not holding up their end of the bargain, and so we're not going to release the last of the hostages. And then Trump is saying, well, if they don't release the hostages, then call off the ceasefire. And just where does that leave the Houthis? Where does that leave the Red Sea? Nobody really knows. Though inactivity could be considered as an improvement in maritime security, JMIC assesses the threat to merchant vessels has not changed and recommends industry remain vigilant. It said in a weekly update, the transit numbers remain fairly consistent. So look, we've had progress in recent weeks. Looks like a setback in these last few days here. They're still not shooting, so that's a good thing. We'll see what comes out of this one, but the ships are still not moving through the Red Sea. Now, let's talk a little bit about these Coke earnings. Coca-Cola sales easily top estimates as global demand rises. Coca-Cola on Tuesday reported quarterly earnings and revenue that topped analysts' expectations as global demand for its drinks rose. Net sales rose 6% to $11.54 billion. Organic revenue, which strips out acquisitions, divestitures, and foreign currency, climbed 14% in the quarter, largely fueled by higher prices. There's that inflation genie again. Coke's pricing rose 9% in the quarter, 4% of which came from markets dealing with hyperinflation. That's probably places like Lebanon, maybe Argentina still got very high inflation. The rest came from price hikes and favorable mix, meaning that customers bought products that were more expensive. While most of Coke's organic revenue growth came from pricing, the company did see higher demand, unlike many consumer companies, including rival Pepsi. Coke's unit case volume grew 10%, reversing last quarter's decline. The metric strips out the impact of pricing in foreign currency to reflect demand. The company attributed its increasing volume to growing demand in China, Brazil, and the U.S. So whatever Coke is doing, it's working here, guys, because Pepsi is losing market share and Coke is gaining it. Coke stock this morning's having a pretty good morning. It's up 4.4%, trading at $67.33. That's higher by about $2.85. We also got earnings from DuPont, the chemical maker. DuPont stock jumps as earnings beat estimates, boosted by semiconductor recovery and AI. By the way, semiconductor recovery, I'm not sure. What are they recovering from? The biggest bull market in history, the largest speculative asset bubble since tulips? I haven't heard the phrase semiconductor recovery anywhere else yet. I don't know where that came from. But moving on, DuPont stock rose more than 4% early Tuesday after the chemicals giant reported better than expected fourth quarter revenue and earnings, boosted by semiconductor demand and AI. Sales of semiconductor technologies were up in the low teens on an organic basis. In a statement, DuPont cited the continued recovery in semiconductor demand, driven primarily by AI technology applications and stronger demand in China. Sales of DuPont's interconnect solutions were up low double digits on an organic basis. The company said this reflected broad-based end market strength, share gains, and the impact of AI. DuPont's industrial solution sales rose mid-single digits on an organic basis. The company pointed to improved demand for biopharma and healthcare markets, as well as strength in printing and packaging applications. So pretty good quarter all around for DuPont. DuPont stock is up 5.3% now, trading at $80.31. That's higher by $4 and a nickel ahead of the opening bell here. All right. We got two more to talk about here. Let's talk about what's going on in Europe. We are seeing sharply higher energy prices in Europe, although it is not a catastrophe yet. Probably won't rise to catastrophic levels. Europe has gotten off pretty cheap over the prior two winters, and well, they're not getting away quite so unscathed this year. Europe poised for blast of Arctic cold as gas storage drops. Freezing temperatures and low wind power production put further pressure on Europe's strained energy markets as natural gas prices trade at the highest in more than 2 years. Heating demand will surge as high pressure over Scandinavia, bringing easterly wind, is compounded by a shift in the Arctic oscillation pattern and a buckled jet stream that's trapping colder air over northern Europe. Basically the same thing that's got the Midwest freezing today. It's happening in Europe also. Average temperatures in the Northwest Europe could drop below zero next week, the lowest level since January of 2024, according to Weather Services International. European countries have drained their gas inventories to shore up power generation across a region that increasingly relies on intermittent renewable energy. A spate of windless days this winter, slightly colder weather, and the loss of Russian gas transit via Ukraine has left European storage sites less than half full, the lowest for this time of year since 2022. By the way, can I get a ruling here? European storage sites are less than half full. Is this an optimistic statement or a pessimistic statement? All right, they're saying half full. Got to go optimism, right? But, it's less than half full. So what a pessimistic, optimistic appraisal of the situation. I just don't know what to make of it. The glass is always half empty with me, though. You guys know we don't really do optimism here. So let me know. Less than half full. Optimistic or pessimistic. But let's look at what's going on with Dutch TTF natural gas futures. This is the best, we'll say the best metaphor, the best number to capture what's happening in European energy markets. And this is going back to about April of 2024. You can see European gas futures have been steadily rising. We're at 58.59 euros per megawatt hour equivalent for natural gas. That has risen sharply in the last 2 weeks or so. Now, let's put this in perspective. We're going to zoom out on this chart now. Let's zoom way out so that we capture 2022 and the initial aftermath of the Russian invasion. And you can see when we had this ridiculous chart of Dutch TTF gas futures, when everybody was worried about Europe just running down to nothing, especially following the Nord Stream pipeline attack. Yes, prices have risen dramatically in the last few weeks, but guys, we are still a far cry from anything like we saw in 2022. So, let's not be too alarmist. Is Europe going to run out of natural gas next week? No, almost certainly not. That being said, Europe has an energy problem that they need to address, and it's not going away. Hope is not a strategy, and sooner or later, Europe is going to have people, engineers, scientists dictate energy policy instead of activist children. Just an idea. I just throw it out there. You guys do what you want with it. And last but not least, we got to talk about this. Supermicro's roller coaster continues into earnings with a 59% stock pop in the last week. People have bid up Supermicro Computer like crazy the last week. Let's look at a 5-day chart here. All right. In the last 5 days, it is up almost 59%. What's going on here? The chart won't update for whatever reason. Look, this stock is up like crazy this year. It's down 5% this morning. I guess the opening bell just rang. For whatever reason, the chart doesn't want to update here. But look, guys, they're coming out. They're calling it a business update because they're not going to be audited financials that they release. They have until the 25th of this month. That's their extended deadline to file their financials. They still haven't filed it yet. Everything this company says has to be, the only safe assumption is everything they say is BS until proven otherwise. And yet people are bidding up this stock by 59%. All they did was announce a business update. They didn't say our financials have been audited. They didn't say we're going to file the 10K or the 10Q, which is now like 6 months late. They didn't say anything that would suggest all the damning evidence in the Hindenburg report and the Ernst & Young resignation didn't happen. They're still being probed by the DOJ. They're still being sued by a whistleblower. I mean, all the problems of this company have not gone anywhere, but these wackos have bid this stock up by almost 60% in a week on nothing, and they're still facing delisting. Guys, just go to 7-Eleven and buy a freaking scratch off if you really need to. Like, if you feel compelled to buy this stock, just go buy a lottery ticket. It is every bit as informed a decision as it is buying Supermicro stock. I mean, the management they're liars. They're frauds. They're criminals. All right. Charles Lang is going to end up in handcuffs before this is done. That's assuming he can't pawn this whole thing off on an underling and get him to take the fall for it. And people are buying this stock is just pure speculation and hopium. Good luck to you guys. We'll get the business update after the bell today. And again, I'm sure the numbers are going to be great because, I don't know, they made $1 trillion. Why not? Supermicro made $1 trillion. Congratulations. It's the best quarter ever. Carries about that much weight. And I just want to say thank you very much to the Snowman, you chilly SOB. What's going on, Snowman? He says, hey, Jack, seen the earnings from Coca-Cola. I have, Snowman. We talked about them earlier in the show. Pretty stark contrast to what we saw from Pepsi. Mish mentioned Coke Zero might be playing a role there. I don't drink that much soda, so I couldn't really tell you guys. I don't know what to make of Coke's earnings. That CNBC article did mention that they're seeing rising demand in the U.S., in Brazil, and in China. The rising demand in China kind of stuck out at me as questionable because, well, there's a lot of anti-American sentiment in China right now, and Coca-Cola is one of those quintessential American brands. I'm having a hard time believing they're really doing that well in China. In the U.S., you've got cash-strapped consumers. You've also got the Ozempic effect, which has hurt soda sales. So maybe that Ozempic, maybe people are coming off of Ozempic and they're falling right back into their bad old habits. Maybe that's starting to happen. There was a little bit of a head scratcher for me with those Coke earnings, to be honest with you. But they were good numbers and the stock is up this morning. So thank you very much, Snowman, for supporting the channel, for being a melon head for 3 months. And this is Pasta Man. Here's me illegally super chatting. All right. Why are you illegally super chatting? Is this, did you not receive permission from she who must be obeyed before you gave that super chat, Pasta Man? Is that what's going on there? Either way, I appreciate you breaking the law on my behalf. You're an outlaw. You seriously, on the steel horse that you ride. Yeah. Thank you, Pasta Man, for supporting the channel. And he's back again, illegally super chatting. In the world of Fartcoin, SMCI is a piker. Well, you know, in that context, it makes perfect sense, right? People are bidding up Fartcoin and Goatius Maximus, and celebrity idiot of the week Inu is making all this money. Even a apparently Hawk Tua coin made another run because of a podcast. And then, there was another rug pull by the same clowns. Shocking turn of events. Criminals doing crime. Say it ain't so. So yeah, in that context, Supermicro rallying 60% makes perfect sense. Pasta Man, I guess I'm still looking at this through the wrong lens, right? These lenses apply things like reason, accountability, and math. Well, you know, when you take that away, you're like, oh, now I understand why Supermicro's up 60%, because this is the golden age of fraud and criminals thrive while honest businessmen don't. Now I get it. It makes perfect sense. Thank you for that epiphany of clarity that you have provided, sir. And once again, thank you for illegally super chatting. And last but not least, Mr. P. Nice. Thank you, sir, for supporting the channel, being a Melonhead member for 6 months. He says, this is my round-tripping chat message. You round-tripping, channel-stuffing SOB P. Nice. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, for being a Melonhead. Thank you to all you Melonheads and everybody for having your coffee with us this morning. Once again, guys, apologize for the voice. It will be back to normal eventually, hopefully, maybe Sunday. Thanks again for the super chats. Thank you to my magnanimous Melonheads on Patreon and YouTube. You guys rock. I got links down below should you feel so inclined. Don't forget that like button on the way out and that subscribe button if you're new here. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Love you guys. Everybody, till next time, live small and dream big.